So I was walking with my son the other day, and we were talking about real estate, and he is currently attending our real estate legacy challenge right now. And one of the questions I asked him while we were walking the dogs, I was like, "Hey, Bryant," I was like, "Do you want like a new construction property, or do you prefer a fixer upper?" And he answered the question. He's like, "Look," he's like, "I think I would rather a fixer upper." And I was like, "Why?" Because I was curious as a father. You wonder why your kids say things, right? Is it just to please you, or is it just because they thought about it? And he's like, "Well, because you learn a lot of things, and when you do the repairs, you learn so much." And I was like, "Wow, like what a cool thing to be like thinking about at 8 years old, and think like that, right?" So I wanted to do this video about how to talk to your kids about real estate, right? Because my kids are like soaking it all up, right? And I know like sometimes, like I'm here, they're listening to me talk to clients, they're listening to me, go do classes, they're in the classes. And it's one of those things where I feel like most people, most adults, like we don't try to expose our kids to that, right? Because, if you're like me, I grew up in a house where people didn't really talk a lot about money, right? And that was like something like it was kind of like taboo to not talk, to talk about money, right? It was just like, you just don't talk about it. You just kind of knew like, hey, like don't ask questions about money. Everything is fine, or everything's gonna seem like it's fine, and everything is gonna be okay. And one of the changes that my wife and I decided to make was make sure that we talk to our kids about money, and whether or not we're going through good times or bad times, or whatever it is, like we want them to understand that, right? And that was something that we both didn't really have with our parents. Not saying that they did something wrong, they did what they thought was right, but it's all about like how we educate the next generation, because I believe like that's what's going to set us up for success in the future, right? So one of the things that I do with my kids, and I'm not telling you what to do with your kids, do whatever you want, you're a parent, but one of the ways that I expose my kids is I bring them along on real estate deals, right? So I remember when Bryant was younger and Cecilia and I had just met, I was like, "Hey, can I take Bryant to an open house?" And she's like, "Sure, if he wants to go." So Bryant and I hosted an open house together, right? So he was exposed to an open house and people coming in, and this house was really nice. I remember it specifically. It was in DC. It was fully renovated. It was staged. It was awesome. And he went with me. And he was able to talk to clients as they come in. He was able to, see the house, what they did with it. And, it was fully renovated. So it was very beautiful and whatnot. And we started talking about it at a young age. So one of the biggest thing I do with my kids is I expose them to it, right? Exposure just teaches a kid so much, because whether we know it or not, they're always listening, and they're always like absorbing what their environment is showing them, right? So I always expose, Bryant and Axel's 16 months, but it's like, I always expose them to this because I want them to understand it, that, hey, this is a great way to kind of create a legacy and move the family legacy forward, right? So another way that I expose them is I'll bring them along on, when we meet with our construction company. So Bryant and I had a meeting on site with our construction company and our team, and I brought him along, and I was like, you need to be exposed to this. You need to tell me what you learned from it after the fact, so that I can know that you're learning things. And just exposing him to those sort of conversations that you're having with people really helps them like to really develop and come into their own, because he's very passionate about real estate, very passionate about building things, and you just draw that out. And one of the biggest things that I'm so grateful that my dad taught me was essentially, like being smart with books and, numbers and all these things is great, right? But not knowing how to deal with people, like not having street smarts, like that will cripple you. You could be the smartest guy out there, and if you don't know how to talk to people, if you don't know how to relate to people and conversate with them, like you're not going to be anything, right? So I'm very big on exposing my kids to those real life conversations, right? And especially in real estate. So another way is I bring them along to my challenges, my classes that we're teaching, and or have him watch online, because I want him to be exposed to these things. And that's what really sparked this conversation with him and I while we were walking the dogs. And he said, hey, look, like I want a fixer upper because I'll learn a lot, right? And he didn't, yes, he probably thought about that on his own, but a lot of it comes from the environment that he was exposed to. Because guess what? For the past 2-3 weeks, we've been looking at a flip property or a potential flip like almost every single week. Like we've been going there, and guess what? I'm taking him with me, right? I'm taking him with me. I'm giving him like tasks to do, like, hey, hold the flashlight, right? Hey, hold the tape measure, or hey, go like measure this thing, right? So it's really important to kind of give them little tasks too, because that's how they learn and they really absorb that, especially in that way. Another way too is, on this construction site, I had him talk to people, talk to the other contractors and say, hey, look, like, what do you do? Oh, that's cool. He's watching our granite guy measure using a laser, and that was fascinating. I mean, it's fascinating to everybody, right? But it's really cool, like, to see him, like, be happy about it and just, like, kind of take on his own thing, right? And then what I like to do is ask questions, right? Like, asking him questions like, hey, do you think you would buy a new construction property or would you buy a fixer-upper, right? And you make them think, right? And one of the questions I asked him on that walk was, hey, so when do you want to buy your first real estate property, right? And he was like, 13. I was like, 13? He's like, yeah. I was like, why? He's like, because that's when you become a man. And I was like, that's a great answer. That he definitely got from me, right? So the thing about it is you want to make sure that you're exposing your kids, having these conversations with them, and then taking them along on this journey, right? And another thing too is, we talk about this in our household, but we talk about the hard times, the challenging times and the fun times, right? Because we want our kids to understand that, hey, like, it's not a fairy tale out there, right? You're not going to always have amazing times, right? There are going to be some tough times, and that's okay, because that's what sets you up for the next step, right? And you learn so much during those challenging times that I don't know, like, that I would personally give it up, right? I wouldn't say like, hey, I wish I didn't go through that, because I know for a fact that I would not have learned certain things, or new companies would not have been born if it wasn't for those hard times. So that's why it's really important to bring your kids along, expose them to the conversations, talk to them about money and how to control it. And especially with real estate, bring them along again on transactions or flips or just meeting people, right? Bring them to classes. Like, I know Valencia and I, we really have a family-friendly environment, and we encourage people to bring their kids because we want their kids to really see this potential and take this legacy and pass it on to them and their families, right? So bring your kids along. If you're not, like, signed up for one of our classes, like, definitely, check the link in my bio. You'll see it there. And another thing too is, again, like, just conversate with them, ask them fun questions, ask them like, hey, what would you do this? Or, give them tasks to do when you're on site at a project. Whether you're going to buy it or not, like, it's always good to just walk around the neighborhood and say, hey, like, what do you think about that house? Like, that house is pretty messed up, right? What would you do to it? So just get their creative minds flowing, and that will really help them to kind of get, really, like, adhere to that kind of, like, real estate knowledge and just kind of, like, learn more. So thank you guys for watching. This was kind of like a fun video I wanted to do. I just thought about it today, and I hope you guys liked it. Click the subscribe button below if you're not, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.